Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for being here at Intersections. Intersections is a project of Interfaith Alliance of Iowa. We have been doing Intersections for 13 years and bringing different speakers to you on a variety of topics. And so I'm really glad that each of you are here, both in the room and online. I'm Connie Ryan. I'm the Executive Director of Interfaith Alliance of Iowa, and just very glad to be here and to talk about mental health and the intersection with the criminal justice system. And I'll introduce our speaker in just a moment, but I do want to make sure that we recognize and acknowledge the life of Dorothy Higdon. Dave and Dorothy have been longtime supporters of Interfaith Alliance and attend almost every intersections and other events that we've had in the Cedar Rapids. And she passed a couple of weeks ago, and she just was an amazing advocate. And so just want to acknowledge her and her life. If you get our emails, you know that it is our year-end campaign week. You probably are tired of getting our emails this week, but we are grateful. So many of you have supported this organization over the years, but particularly this week, and just grateful to each of you. And if you haven't had an opportunity, of course, there's more time, so you can always give by the end of the year. So thank you for all of your support. Very much appreciate it. I understand that it's Kevin Teckau's birthday today. Is that true?
45 years old.
He is 45 years old, evidently. So happy birthday. And Kevin is part of our advisory team for Intersections. So grateful for you and your life and all that you do as well. Next month, just I'll announce now, we're going to talk about advocacy from afar when you aren't in the midst of things in the Des Moines area. How do you do that and how do you do it effectively? And it's the announcement card says Connie Ryan and Friends. So it will be me and Mike Owen, who is with Common Good and lives in the Cedar Rapids area, and Therese Grant, who is the co-president of Legal Women Voters of Iowa. She lives in Grinnell. And so they will be my partners in presenting on doing advocacy from afar. So I hope you will return next January 3rd after the New Year. So. But today we have Sheriff Tony Thompson, who took office in 2009, and evidently this is going to be your last term. We'll have to ask what's next. He joined the U.S. Army as a military police officer in December of 1988 and retired from the Iowa Army National Guard with just over 21 years following his election as sheriff. Sheriff Thompson's career with the Black Hawk County Sheriff's Office began in March of 1994, and he has worked in the jail, special services, and patrol divisions. Before taking command as sheriff, his prior assignments included drug education officer, community services coordinator, computer crimes investigator, patrol officer, public information officer, and SWAT team leader. Sheriff Thompson is known statewide for his mental health advocacy and diversion efforts from the criminal justice system, and served on the complex mental health needs subcommittee for the Iowa Department of Health and Human Services, and helped frame the mental health redesign legislation in 2012. In addition, he served on the state's Public Safety Advisory Board, Iowa's Criminal and Juvenile Justice Planning Advisory Council. Sheriff Thompson is the immediate past state president of the Iowa State Sheriffs and Deputies Association, and continues to serve on several local boards, committees, and council. He lives in Cedar Falls with his wife, Janelle, and sons, Brady and Bryce, and has a hobby farm. I don't know what that means, but maybe we'll learn about that too. Sure. Won't you help me to welcome Sheriff Thompson, please?
Well, good afternoon. Thank you so very much for having me. It is absolutely an honor. This is the last talk that I get to do, I believe, other than maybe a retirement concession speech on the 31st. This is the last public talk I get to give before retirement. I actually came from Des Moines, where 77 of the 99 county sheriffs met for our winter school, and 25 of us across the state are retiring this year. So it's a big bald spot on the tire that's going around. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. I look forward to being retired. I look forward to the challenges that lie ahead and the weird things that are going to occur. This is all I've ever done in my adult life, and so I don't know what it's going to feel like on January 1st, waking up and not having an obligation. So I feel like I've been sprinting a marathon for 31 years, and so now it's time for a deep breath and to relax a little bit. So I don't know the answer to what's next, but I'm open to the challenges that lie ahead. So let's talk for a minute about mental illness. Yes, I wrote a book. Some people said, why did you write a book? Others, friends of mine, I had a couple of sheriffs proof the book. And when I reached out to one of my friends, the sheriff of Polk County, he goes, wait a minute, you wrote a book? He goes, like with a crayon and a Big Chief tablet? All right, fine. I'll send it to your wife and she can read it to you as a bedtime story. Why did I write a book? Well, I wrote it actually out of pure frustration, probably more than anything else, because this intersection between mental illness and criminal justice, we didn't create as sheriffs. We didn't create as law enforcement. In the criminal justice system, we didn't create it, but we are certainly the recipients of it. Now more than ever. The book I wrote was called Any Place But Here. And I know there's several people online, and I know there's several people here in the audience with me today. I'm going to let you in on a little secret. As I'm writing feverishly every 15, 20 minutes at lunch, while I ate my salad, if my wife's online. Now, it might have been, a little green leaf on a big old tenderloin or something, but it was still a salad. Every place I go for lunch, I say, now you tell my wife if she calls, I had a salad. But it really was born out of frustration that we didn't create this problem, but boy, we're sure paying for it. The jails are full. In my jail, I have a 272-bed jail, and 60% on average every day, heads in beds are mentally ill. And now today, all I'm holding in my population, forcible felons, pretrial forcible felons, that's rape, murder, robbery, really, really violent crime, or mentally ill people. That's it. The old Otis that checks himself on the weekends, stumbling, grabbing the key and checking himself in, those guys don't exist for us anymore. Since COVID, they go someplace else. In fact, there's programs where they go to a hotel and attend programming through the Department of Corrections. They don't come to jail anymore. I tell that joke when I say Otis to like college kids getting ready to graduate, and they, we don't get the reference. But I can tell in this room, I can tell that joke, and like, yeah, I got it. Andy Griffith, cool, great good show. So as I'm writing this Any Place But Here, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, any place but the Blackhawk County Jail. And when I visit with my 99 county sheriff friends, the 77 of which were down in Des Moines with me this week, they're like, any place but here is my personal county jail too, because at the very bottom of the mental health care delivery funnel in the state of Iowa sits a county jail. Because any place but here is, we have no other options. We wish we did. But the reality in the state of Iowa today is, we don't. We wish we did, but we don't. We didn't build infrastructure such that we could place them someplace else. So it's also a little bit of a prayer that says, man, any place but here really is, could we design something different so that we aren't the recipients? We don't have the luxury of putting the no vacancy sign out in front of the county jail. Wouldn't that be great? So just between you and me, as I'm writing it, I'm thinking any place but here means don't bring them to my jail. The reality, as I wrote this, as I started to broaden my horizons, I recognized it's not just an Iowa problem. It's not just a Waterloo problem. It's not just a Blackhawk County problem. It's not just an Iowa problem. It's not just a regional problem. It's a nationwide problem, right? I've got friends in San Antonio. I've got friends in Fort Lauderdale. I got friends all over in law enforcement that tell me we are all feeling the same pinch. We're all feeling the same problem. But what's unique, Iowa came by this a little differently, and I want to walk you through how we got here. I know I've only got where's Connie? I know I've only got 4 hours. So, and you give a politician a mic. I'm not the greatest politician in the world, but that's right. Sheriff's got a bully pulpit. I'm going to use it. I'm going to try and get through this kind of quick. How we got here. So let's go back. About 20 years ago, 25 years ago, it was not uncommon for the Blackhawk County Sheriff's Office to do mental health transports 2 and 3 times a day to MHI Independence. Not uncommon. And what those transports were either emergency committals or revocation of outpatient placements ordered by a judge. 2 to 3 times a day. 20 miles over, 20 miles back. Simple, easy. Wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. We're out the door. Good to go. And we didn't think anything of it. We didn't like it because we had to jump out of the county to go get it done. It was a waste of our time, but we did it. Then all of a sudden, something happened. What happened to us? Anybody know what happened? Well, Leslie knows. What happened to us? Yeah, something big happened. All of a sudden, well, it kind of trickled down like this. There was a lawsuit out of Toledo. Well, there was a threat of a lawsuit from Disability Rights Iowa about the Toledo Girls' Home. That threat of a lawsuit, because of a building that was built in the late 50s, early 60s, scared then Governor Branstad. He circled his troops, got his cabinet together and said, hey, we had a building that was built in the late 50s, early 60s. I've got institutions that were built in the late 1800s, early 1900s. We know it doesn't meet ADA standards. We know it probably doesn't meet OSHA standards. There's asbestos-laden pipes. There are doorways we can't roll wheelchairs through. Clarinda, MHI, Cherokee, Independence. What did he do? Preemptively closed 2 of them and dramatically drew down the number of beds available in Cherokee and Independence. In a heyday, there were over 2,000 beds in Independence. There's 45 today, and most of them are juvenile beds. So they're not available to us. So, overnight, almost, young, dumb, knuckle-dragging, snot-nosed, know-nothing, wet-behind-the-ears sheriff watched all of this happening saying, it doesn't affect me, but this is sure interesting political power play at work because Governor Branstad's doing all of this. Okay. And then overnight, something started happening in my jail. Because where do all of those displaced mentally ill people go? Well, about 80% of them found placement because they had successfully navigated or they had private insurance, they got the MC or the Medicaid, Medicare. So if they could pay, they found a nursing home, they found a community-based placement, they found some place to end up. In my book, I talk about it kind of like musical chairs or musical beds. If they could pay, they could stay somewhere. But the 20% that couldn't pay, or the 20% mixed in there that were so aberrantly mentally ill that they swallowed screws, they finger painted with their poo, they assaulted staff, they were disruptive, they were absolutely the hardest to manage. Where did they end up? On the street. They're the ones that sleep on your park benches, underneath your bridges, your warming houses that get kicked from facility to facility to facility. And it's very, very easy to arrest a mentally ill person because we have charges like disorderly conduct, criminal trespass, simple assault, right? Interference with official acts. All of these things that all you have to do is breathe, take in air, and be someplace you're not supposed to be, and I can arrest you for it. And when I'm a police officer trying to figure out how to return this chaotic scene to normalcy, when somebody's howling at the moon, urinating on the side of the convenience store and biting people on the ankles, what do? I can't take them to the hospital. The hospital won't take them. I can't put them in a warming shelter because they're going to bite other people on the ankles. What do I do with it? Well, I can arrest them. Now they're the jail's problem. And that's what ends up happening. I run the largest mental health facility in Blackhawk County. I don't say that proudly. I say that with the most frustration I can possibly muster. But every sheriff in the state can echo those same problems, those same comments. So a book, not very big, because again, Big Chief tablet and a crayon. In fact, when that book released, it dropped on Amazon first and then went out to all the bookstores and stuff. And the first review I got, the headline of the review was M-E-H, meh. And I thought, oh man, this is not going well. My publisher hired an English professor at Iowa State University to review it, to edit it. And I thought, perfect, because I'm a knuckle-dragging cop. I'm not swearing that, now I've got a master's degree, but I'm not going to tell you that grammar, syntax, punctuation, all that stuff is going to be right. It spent 2.5 years in my brain and whatever putting all that together. So it's cleverly written, if I do say so myself. But I'm not going to promise you that it's all right. So I spent the time with an editor back and forth, who's a professor in English. And the meh review was, you know, his heart's in the right place. He's a cop. He's trying to do the right thing. But boy, I couldn't get past all the syntax and grammar errors. And I thought, not my problem, not my fault. I had this really expert guy from Iowa State, but I couldn't. I had to take the brunt on that one. So, and it's not that long a book. So if you buy my book, again, Knuckle Dragon Cop, sorry. My point is, I'm just trying to educate you on the problem, that peek behind the curtain, right? All right, so how we got here. Problem number one, we exhausted all these beds. We removed all these beds out of the system. In my mind, I thought, you know, Governor Branstad's a reasonably smart man. I have to be politically agnostic here, right? He was an MP. I'm an MP. So we're kindred spirits in that respect. He also was chancellor of Des Moines University, Des Moines Osteopathic University. He knows people. I figured as a good Republican, he's probably building some sort of public-private partnership with companies and stuff where he's going to let these companies go make millions of dollars off the state of Iowa. That's the Republican motto. And they're going to create thousands of private beds for psych patients. And they're going to build these hospitals and replace all the beds that we lost, and private companies are going to make money off of it, and great, it's going to backfill. The next words out of his mouth was, see you later, suckers, I'm going to China. I'm going to be an ambassador. And I thought there was no plan. Dang. So in comes Kim Reynolds, and the first thing she said, now Kim, here's a little known fact about Tony Thompson. Tony Thompson was graduated high school from Winterset, Iowa. Anybody know where Winterset is? Two really important people came from Winterset, Iowa, John Wayne and Tony Thompson. Now, when I tell that stuff down Des Moines, they kind of, who's Tony Thompson? But up here, they all say, who's John Wayne? I said, well, he's got a street named after him down in Winterset. I don't, but he does. Kim Reynolds was born went to school and lived 20 miles down the road in St. Charles. Contrary to popular belief, we did not date in high school. I didn't even know her. No, she doesn't like me very much, so we don't get along very well. But when she took office, the first things out of her mouth were, hey, I'm going to save you tax money. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to privatize the control of Medicare and Medicaid payments. I'm going to introduce a program called MCO, Managed Care Organizations. I'm like, Okay, I'm not on Medicaid, Medicare, I don't care. You go, Kimmy, save my taxes. Anybody know this system? Anybody heard of this system? Anybody heard how that's working out? Leslie, how's that working out for us? Not great. It was supposed to save us money. It has not saved us money. It was supposed to improve the quality of care that these patients are getting, that these providers are getting. None of that has happened. Providers are getting paid less for the services they're providing. It's harder for the patients to receive the services that they're supposed to be getting. You compound that with fewer beds. We have providers leaving the state because they can't get paid fair market value for the services they're providing. And all of that created this perfect storm that now all of a sudden, about 6 months ago, the state of Iowa was ranked 51st in the United States for mental health provision. 51st. Now, again, I have to admit that I have a Winterset High School education, but I thought there were only 50 states. How the hell did we become 51st? If we're getting beat by a city, if an entire state is getting beat by the city of District of Columbia, how bad are we? And so my father was a sergeant major in the Army. I lived in Louisiana for a bit. I think you can still marry cousins down there. How are we getting beat by Louisiana? 51st. 51st. The metric for that is number of beds available per capita and number of providers available per capita. So we've got hospitals shutting down their MHUs, transitioning to ICUs and other bed space because it pays better than mental health delivery does. We've got providers leaving the state because in-state provision of mental health care counseling and treatment pays X. Out-of-state provision through the MCOs pays 3 times X. So they sneak from Decorah over to Rochester, Minnesota, and they make 3 times the amount of money in the same system. Tell me how this works. This is how we got here. Because now the only way for somebody to be treated, and when my book dropped, the first place I did a book signing was in Cedar Falls, and a pastor from Cedar Falls came up to me afterwards and he said, I have a 15-year-old bipolar son. He was having a very manic moment. I took him to the emergency room, and the emergency room nurse told him, the quickest way for your son to get help is have him arrested. And I thought, you've got to be kidding me. I knew that was what he's going to say. But for an ER nurse to openly say it is so frustrating. That's the nature, that's the peak behind the curtain today. The quickest way to get your boy help is to get him arrested. Once we get somebody arrested, we get them regulated back on their medication because a lot of them seek street drugs and other things. So we do, in jail, get them re-regulated back on their medication. We have programs like long-acting injectables and things like that that we program, and then we'll provide 2 or 3 extra shots down the road to get them stabilized and remain stabilized out back when they get released back out in the community. We will do things like that to try and help our diversion out of the criminal justice system for longer, because know this, once somebody is introduced into the criminal justice system with a mental illness, they're going to be in that system 3 to 6 times longer than somebody, air quotes here, normal is. You have the same person, same charge. If they suffer from a mental illness, they will be in the system 3 to 6 times longer. It's just the way of the world. So there we are, snapshot, as quick as I could go through, just kind of the background of why I sat down. Now there's a few people that as I was tinkling the ivories, writing this book, that I thought about every day when I wrote on that for the 15 minutes while I ate my salad. One of them is a family God loved them. They were a foster family that ended up adopting a special needs child. As he gets older, he gets bigger. He, amongst all of his other problems, he's agoraphobic, meaning he doesn't like public spaces. He doesn't like being in crowds, and he has to go to school. And some mornings that is a fight. One particular morning, and we've been engaging this family for years, but one particular morning I thought, it's about time for me to go back down and engage on this call. I show up with my deputies, and this particular morning he took a bleach spray bottle and sprayed it in his adoptive father's face. I knew that he had because I could smell it, and the father was wearing a black t-shirt, and you know what bleach does to a black t-shirt, those speckles that happen on the black t-shirt? He was busy trying to get the bleach out of his eyes. The son was in the basement, so I sat down with him, and I explained to him, truancy is not a charge rendered on the child. Everybody know that? It's rendered on the parent. And so as we're walking through trying to rationalize to a mentally ill child why he has to go to school, why we're here intervening, it's not registering, it's not working. He ends up going, but he ends up going because we're basically forcing him to go to school. Because of this agoraphobia, he doesn't want to go. But this is that family's lot in life. And they volunteered for it. And I thought about this as I write this book. The other person that I thought about a lot, and I write about him in the book, when I was a drug education officer, I met a young man who was a sixth grader at the time. I walked into school one morning, and the principal introduced me to a young man that was in an opportunity room. And I use that kind of in air quotes. That's what they called it. I didn't know really what that meant. I walked in, and he's interested in this tiny little room. It's an isolation room. He got in trouble in the hallway, and so they stuck him there for the day. I think I call him Gus in the book. But Gus, born with fetal alcohol syndrome, he was also adopted by a loving, God-fearing family. And Gus had big, thick pop bottle glasses that he never understood you could actually wipe the lenses of the glasses. So he was always looking through the world through this smear, and socially very inept and had challenge, really wanted socialization, really wanted affection, really wanted to be liked by the other folks, especially girls, but never got that. But because of his fetal alcohol problems, the synapses of his brain were broken. So cause and effect didn't register for him. And so he would do something impulsive, never understanding that the effect of whatever he did was coming. He's now 31 years old, out on his own, and his own conservator, so he gets his own check, his own money, and he can't manage his own affairs. But we don't have an option for him for long-term housing, long-term placement. He's one that continues to fall through the cracks. And when Waterloo PD finally gets fed up with him standing in the middle of the roadway, screaming, yelling, frustrated, impulsively creating problems, they arrest him. And it's his 15th, 20th, 30th arrest because they can't figure out anything else to do with Gus. The last time I heard from Gus was about 3 months ago. He had called 911 30 times, I think, from the Walgreens across the street from Allen Hospital, demanding an ambulance ride because he was having chest pains. 200 yards from the ER opening, the ER entrance. Again, he kind of likes the attention, he likes the socialization, and he wanted that flamboyant entrance with the lights and sirens from the ambulance. He could have walked 200 yards to the front entrance of the ER, but he demanded the ambulance ride, called 30 times. Now, this is a young man, part of that 20% that doesn't have placement, that doesn't have housing, that really should be at a state-run institution. He would do well there. But because he doesn't have that placement option, he bounces and he keeps bouncing. And nobody will take him. He's frustrating. He's problematic. He will get mad, not consider the consequence. He will get the consequence. And then 3 days later, he will walk up to you and say, I'm so sorry. I get it. I understand. And then 20 minutes later, he will commit the same or the same action again, not realizing the same consequences coming again. He got the ride to the ER, by the way. That one of 20% costs us more as taxpayers than the other 80% that have found suitable placement, because he uses the ERs, he uses the court systems. He's never even heard of an urgent care, doesn't even know, and never walked into one, but he knows the name of every ER nurse by sight 2 blocks away on every shift at every hospital in Waterloo and Cedar Falls. Guaranteed. He knows the name of every dispatcher on every shift by voice and will call them out by name. That's the high frequency user, and how dramatic, how expensive the broken system is for you. So there's all these unique little facets of a broken mental health care system. It's not just woe is me because I run a county jail and it's frustrating. It's woe is all of us because we're taxpayers and we're paying for an extremely expensive broken system. It's woe is us because we are our brother's keeper. We're obligated to take care of these folks, not criminalize the mentally ill. If there's 2 things I could leave you with, and this is how I'll close. Number 1, please help me destigmatize mental illness, because I have one. It's called PTSD. Number 2, mental health reform must happen in the state of Iowa. We started last summer and it moved us 1/8 of an inch. 1/8 of an inch, but at least we're talking about it. At least we're using those terms, those words, mental health reform. We know it has to happen. I was with Brenna Bird last night and she used those words. So we know it's got to happen. Reform, destigmatization. What questions do you have for me, folks? I appreciate you spending some time with me today. Was that 25 minutes?
Perfectly.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
If you have questions, if you'll raise your hand and I'll bring the microphone to you. And if you're online, you can put your questions in the chat.
So thank you for coming. I wonder why doesn't the state implement some group homes being built in a number of middle and larger size communities in the various regions of our state, and or get some federal money and know how to have monies to operate those facilities?
So a Tony Thompson answer to that would be, it's not sexy. It costs money, right? And it costs a lot of money. And the ongoing costs of upkeep, maintenance. I have an organization up in Waterloo called EPI, Exceptional Persons Incorporated, and they used to run group homes, and they got out of the business because the insurance is astronomical, the upkeep on the properties astronomical, the hiring of staff to manage, maintain, and work 24 hours in the facilities, astronomical, and the expense from a bean counter's perspective far outweighed the benefit if you didn't have a mentally ill person in your family. I guarantee you, if the governor had someone mentally ill in their family, we would have a completely different mental health delivery system in the state of Iowa than we do. But that's not a dig, that's a truism. And really, Up till now, and that's another thing I kind of admit to in the book, up till now, the only people speaking out about mental health reform are family members, are advocates. So coming from a sheriff's bully pulpit side, it's a little different mouthpiece. And so I hope people listen. I hope people pay attention.
Thank you, Sheriff, for
Absolutely.
this very interesting lecture. Retired elementary teacher here.
Yeah.
Can you speak to what you and your staff see in terms of families that are dealing with very, very young children who are mentally ill, have not been diagnosed, and the resources are whatever they can get through school, which is limited and extremely expensive and very, very ineffective at times?
So that's obviously another reason why I wrote this book, because I want to be a voice for who feels like they are voiceless, right? And a family truly feels voiceless. Who do they talk to when they don't feel like they have a resource to turn to? We will do what we can to turn them to NAMI, to turn them to a local provider, to turn them to, you know, anybody that will listen compassionately. But the reality is, we are getting better at diagnosing. We are getting better at turning out school psychologists. We are, diagnosing and diagnostic testing earlier in schools. There was about the same time, maybe a year after, I started working on adult mental health issues with the state. They turned out a juvenile mental health subcommittee as well. And so there was some efforts on that front as well. Again, about the same result, where we talked a lot, but it's frustrating because at the end of the day, a lot of the fix, a lot of the reparation that needs to happen comes down to money, comes down to investment, not just funding, but time and energy and insightful approach to programmatically hitting this. Again, I said the reform that happened this summer is going to move the margins about a quarter inch, eighth of an inch, something like that, and it's frustrating. So the pain that these families feel is real. It's bad in the adult side. I purposely stay away from the juvenile side because, number one, that's not my area of expertise. I don't deal a lot with juveniles, but it's worse. It's compounding worse for the juveniles. Way worse than it is in the adult side. Yes.
Retired hospital social worker here.
Yeah, sorry.
A couple of years ago, all the providers, you guys and the hospitals and all that got together here in Cedar Rapids, and across the street from the mental health clinic, Abbey Center, in an old grade school, they were able to form a 24/7 emergency mental health crisis unit that actually kept people out of both our emergency rooms and your jails.
Right.
Do you think that could work all over the place?
It will. In fact, the Sheriff of Marion County and I were the ones that got the legislation to pass for access centers statewide. We've got 7 of them. Yours is very good. Blackhawks is very good. Osceola's is not so good. So we've got, I think, 7 of them across the state. When we got that legislation passed, the legislators said, "This is awesome. What a great idea." They passed the legislation, but they didn't fund them. Yeah, so the regions ended up having to raise the money. The counties had to raise the money to fund them. Yeah, so, and that was just exactly it. When a cop's sitting there with somebody biting the ankles of someone, we know we don't want to go to jail with them because we know we're introducing them into a handcuffing to the criminal justice system for life. What other option do we have? Well, an access center is a great option if you have access to them. When we drew the state of Iowa on a map, we said, never should we have to drive more than an hour to drop them off. It should be no eject, no reject. One of the reasons why I say Osceola is not so good is they still exercise the ability to eject, the ability to reject patients. But no more than an hour drive, no eject, no reject, instant access to pharmacology, social work, counseling, you know, all those resources, but it's a streamline into the mental health system, not into the criminal justice system. That was the concept. and it ended up becoming what we now call access centers. And that was two dumb knuckle-dragging cops telling PhDs and experts in the mental health field what we needed.
So that has successfully relieved your jail?
No. No, because some of those folks that I end up holding are committing crimes, not necessarily because of their mental health issue, but have a mental health diagnosis in addition to the violent crime that they're committing. So we're becoming kind of that intermediary between they're significantly mentally ill, but they're also, creating their own unique status as well. But it is improving. It has improved the quality. We have two different systems up there. We have a adult crisis stabilization where, hey, I'm just not having a good day. I'm depressed. I need re-regulated back on my medication. We have that as well as a crisis stabilization center. So, and then we also have a detox center, which is, I just had a really rough night and I made suicidal threats, whatever. So a detox center is the third component to that. Leslie.
Thank you. I would just add that the access centers are really, really great for people who know that they're sick. But when we're talking about the people who are ending up in Tony's jail and all the other jails, we're talking about a lot of people who have no idea they're sick because of the nature of their brain illness themselves. 57 to 98% of people have something called anosognosia. So they can't voluntarily take themselves to a hospital, to an access center, anywhere to get treatment. And that's the people that we're really failing in the state. That's the same people that can't live in a group home because they are not able to secure them well enough and take care of them and train them well enough. The other thing I wanted to share is that it's actually costing us in 1 year to not treat schizophrenia $282 billion. So when people say we don't have money to invest in improving the system, we're spending much more money to do a really poor job. So that's nationally.
If you don't know Leslie Carpenter, she is the state's expert on this
She's awesome.
topic.
Tony, I've read your book. It's very good. So
Thank
I
you.
recommend it to anybody here
Thank
that
you.
wants to dig into the issues that he presented here. And I give you a shout out. One of the best in law enforcement in Iowa. Just a really exceptional leader.
Thank you,
And I want
sir.
to congratulate you on your career.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Tony does have his book here for sale also. I believe it's $15 and he can do all of the ways of purchasing, including Venmo. So you can do that after the presentation.
Yes, I'm wondering, since officers now seem to be on the front lines, is anyone helping in training the officers?
I love that question. Thank you. So in my agency alone, because we run a jail, large mental health facility, it shouldn't be, but it is. There are three tools, let's call them tools in a tool bag that we put in every officer. I don't care if they're a civilian detention officer, if they're a master controller, if they're a booking clerk, if they're a patrol officer, an investigator. 3 classes, 3 trainings that I mandate for everybody that they have to attend. 40-hour crisis intervention training, 40 hours. And we do it through a group called Solution Point Plus. They were former San Antonio Police crisis intervention cops, plain clothes, plain uniform, or plain vehicles, and they would jump every mental health call, every substance abuse call. It was born out of anybody been to San Antonio? They got the River Walk, beautiful, popular tourist location where the river runs through downtown, all the bars, the restaurants and that. They didn't want vagrancy. They didn't want homelessness. They didn't want that to detract from the Alamo and all the stuff down there. So that's where it was born out of, but it became this crisis response, suicide, every kind of mental health call. And that unit, now their then sergeant and others have gone to nationwide teaching us how to respond to crisis, how to intervene during crisis. 40 hours, including role playing and that kind of stuff to do those kind of interventions. Great training, but it's 40 hours. It's an entire week. You have to take people off the schedule to get them through. Difficult to do, but well worth the investment. That's tool in the toolbox, number one. Number two is mental health first aid. Mental health first aid is somewhere between 8 and 16 hours. And that is just really being able to identify what kind of mental illness they're suffering from. So when they're having visions, when they are out of mind, out of touch with reality, what kinds of things they're saying, we can kind of identify, I think they're bipolar, I think they're schizophrenic, I think they're schizoaffective, I think they're whatever, and it helps us interact with them better. It helps us anticipate their next move, it helps keep our officers more safe, right? And so we utilize that tool a lot in de-escalation, in better relating to, better managing their behavior, better anticipating their next move, those kinds of things. And then the last one's relatively new. It's maybe 5, 6 years old now. And that is trauma-informed training. So that's based on the premise that we recognize that everybody comes into a crisis with baggage. They're carrying with them all of that stuff that has borne them through what actually built up to today, whether that was some sort of childhood trauma, sexual abuse, single parent raising, family, drug addiction, whatever the trauma is, we start identifying with or identifying the type of trauma that they are carrying with them. And then we start utilizing that. We start relating to that trauma. And that helps us create more commonality. It helps us with that de-escalation. And that's somewhere between 4 or 8 hours of training as well. Those are the baseline foundational skills, in addition to interpersonal communication, verbal judo, all the other stuff that we teach our officers. Those are those baseline mental health trainings at a foundational level that we mandate for everybody that we deal with. Every officer that I have, every employee that I have goes through those foundational skills. It's a lot. Some of that is state mandated, some of it is not, but it's definitely worthy of the investment because it makes a much better officer in the long run.
I wanted to ask.
Sorry, Art.
I wanted to ask if your colleagues, the Sheriff's Department and the Sheriff's Association, all of those 77 sheriffs, are they in line with you and this issue? Uniform voice?
They hear me when I speak. I mean, I've done a lot of these talks and advocating, and as the state president of the state association, the training was a big force for my tenure as the president, and so we made that training available. Now, again, I'm a larger county. I have a lot more staff. I have a lot of ability and flexibility than a 5-man agency down in, Wayne County or up in Lyon County, whatever. So it's somewhat situational. And then there are some that are old, set in their ways, whatever. But so you lay it out for them, but everybody sees the same problem. So when I demonstrate, here's the problem we're all seeing. Here's my response in my agency. Sometimes they say, boy, I wish I could do that. Sometimes they say, how would you recommend I do that with such a small department? And we work together. Sometimes we talk to our providers and say, would you be interested in doing a regional training? Would you be interested in doing, and so we build solutions that might help. We sponsor solutions at a state level that might help. So I can't say yes, always, absolutely, but to know that all 99 county sheriffs know the pinch point and they know the pain, most of them at least will acknowledge the necessity and the importance. Whether they can invest in it financially, staffing wise or not, they will at least acknowledge, yeah, that's important stuff. I wish I could, or I'm doing the best I can to get to that point.
Thank you. I
Yeah,
hope that's one of
absolutely.
the Sheriff Association priorities.
Yes.
And
yeah.
have you thought about running for governor?
Art, I'm getting ready to retire. I want less stress, not more. I told you that she doesn't like me very much. I would love to do some debates. There's some topics in a debate that I would really, really enjoy, but we'll see what comes in the future. Yeah.
Yeah, do you have social workers accompany officers on calls?
So I have 2 social workers on my staff, but I've specifically assigned them within my jail division. Their whole job is post-arrest diversion, and unfortunately for us, that is a full-time job. One of my social workers is actually a Department of Corrections employee that I pay her salary. And what her job is to work with the courts to modify probationary and post-arrest release conditions that a judge, county attorney, public defender will sign off on so that we can expedite them back out of our facility once they've been arrested for that officer that says, I've got them, now what am I supposed to do with them? Possession is 9/10 of the law, right? So I pay her salary because that's worth having her as my employee. The second one is mine. And she does a lot of follow-on care. She does a lot of community resource bridge building. So housing, food, those kinds of things where she networks with all of our other community-based service organizations and that kind of thing to make sure that we've got catchers out there when we push somebody out the back door that they don't fall through the gaps. And then she will follow up. Like I say, if we put somebody on a long-term or long-acting injectable, they won't leave without knowing when their next appointment is, when they're going to get their next shot, who their next shot is, and if they need a ride, we'll even arrange to make sure that they get there. And then that social worker will follow up. They'll come to the house and say, hey, are you taking your meds? Are you being fed? Are you getting your groceries? Have these different community organizations connected with you? It's well beyond what we used to do as a county sheriff's office. But it's the responsible thing to do to make sure that we don't continue to recidivate every 90 days. And in the long run, it's way cheaper than the alternative.
So this could be a dangerous question, but we're all from Lynn County.
Sure.
How does Lynn County, how is our sheriff, how much is he participating, or is our sheriff's department working with you?
So I spent a lot of
these
time with
things?
Brian. Spent a lot of time with Brian and his staff this last week, and I dug him out of the sand quite a little bit this week. No, Brian and I are really good friends. In a lot of ways, Lynn County is very progressive. In a lot of ways, because you're sandwiched in between 2 very liberal and progressive counties in Blackhawk and Johnson, right? And because Leslie's down in Johnson County has been pushing, prodding, and cattle prodding them down there. And we've been trying to follow suit and keep up with the Johnson counties of the world. They're sandwiched in between, but there's been a lot of, with Resource 1 or Resource 2, whatever it is, there's been a lot of emphasis here as well. So I feel very, very comfortable that in this corridor, you've got some really outstanding resources that have been built, some infrastructure that has been built. Now, what frustrates me a little bit, and I'm just going to say this kind of quiet, we went from a region system to a district system, and that starts in July. We had, 13 regions? We will now have 7 districts. Why the reduction? Because it's easier for Des Moines to manage. And I'm going to caveat what I'm getting ready to say by the best ideas always come from Des Moines. If you don't believe it, go ask them. My region up in Waterloo was the largest region for mental health services. At our high point, I think we had 22 counties in our region. That was from Waterloo clear up to Esterville, Iowa, Emmett County. And Mike Martz, the sheriff of Emmett County, called me up one day and said, Tony, we're getting out of the region. We have to drive 2 hours for a meeting. We never see services. We never talk to anybody. And I said, buddy, I don't blame you. I would get out too. He said, Iowa Lakes region is right over here and they're closer. And he said, they don't have a lot for services, but it's like a 20-minute drive for me. And I said, no, I get it. I understand. So we started self-attriting from 22 counties in a region down to, I think we have 13 now. So that's where we sit today. And what the state in this redesign that they're getting ready to implement is getting ready to do, going from 13 regions to 7 districts, they're getting ready to replicate the same mistakes that we've already learned from. My region your region, Johnson County's region, Dubuque's region, Scott County's region, we're all together. We're all together in one region. Now you tell me how that makes any damn sense. Putting the largest population bases in all of eastern Iowa together under one region and expecting one service district to manage all of us. After we've already known that basically for us, it was Mason City and Blackhawk County, Waterloo, Cedar Falls. We couldn't manage all the small little areas. So again, I think that little margin that we moved forward, we're going to replicate a lot of mistakes over the next 2 or 3 years. The state's going to find out, they're going to see it. They're going to see it for the mistakes it is. We're going to pay our lumps and pay our dues, and we're going to have to recalibrate, regroup, and repair the problems that we went through. And again, that's kind of the state of state government, right? We make mistakes, we kind of run head over apple cart and then back up, regroup, recalibrate, start again. Because we don't listen to anybody, because all the great ideas come out of the Capitol. So unfortunately, I think that's where we're heading, and that's frustrating. Yeah.
Yeah, so from what I'm hearing, I might be wrong, but from what I'm hearing is even if we had a robust system of group homes and a robust system of access centers, there'd still be a fairly large population of troublesome individuals who are now ending up in jail.
Yeah.
So what's missing from that?
Well, I think there'd be
system?
less. I think there would be less. If we had suitable long-term safe housing, there would be a lot less. Because that is a major component that is missing right now. Leslie, would you agree? That is a huge missing component. We recognize it in Blackhawk County as probably the major component that we're missing. We can do short-term. We can do 3 days, 3 weeks, but we can't do 3 years. It just doesn't exist. And so at some point, the Warming House, the House of Hope, Salvation Army, they're going to kick them out, right? They just can't stay there long-term. And so, yeah, that suitable long-term safe housing is a huge, huge problem. And again, Leslie spoke to the ones that just, they don't understand that they are mentally ill. They don't feel like they're mentally ill. They don't, that makes them less than compliant. That makes them more difficult, more challenging to counsel, less likely to cooperate. And so placement for those kinds of folks is probably less productive too. And when you get those kinds of folks, we get to a point where we're probably going to have more law enforcement intervention, or at least more law enforcement engagement. And that predicates problem. So you're always going to have that componency, but it should never be to the level that it is right now, or the level that it was a year ago. Because again, we've been slowly building resource and infrastructure, some places way better. We still have resource deserts out there where they have nothing. As I bounce around the state promoting a scribbled book, there are places that just don't have a resource other than maybe telepsych, where here's a laptop, talk to this guy. And that's the answer. That's the resource they have available.
Help me to thank Sheriff Thompson.
Thank you, man. I appreciate you.
Really appreciate the conversation and expertise. He does have his book here, so come and see him for that if you're interested, and if you have any additional questions that we didn't get to. Thank you for those online. Thank you to those who are in the room. If you have anything in front of you that needs to be thrown away or recycled, and cups and all of that, that all goes over to the corner. If you will take care of that for us, and have a great weekend. Thank you.